In today's video, I'm going to create an art journal page in under 30 minutes. And how did I achieve that? Because I challenged myself. I challenged myself to use only those things that were within arm's reach on my table, in my stash, very close at hand. And that includes this magazine picture. You may have seen this before as I auditioned it for another page. This is a napkin. And on this napkin, I've done some stamping with black acrylic paint. I'll show you at the end of the video what I used to make those interesting marks. This napkin is going to give me quick, easy, fast background color. I'm going to glue it down with my fluid matte medium, but I don't have enough behind her head, so I am going to water cut some of that napkin over because it's unnecessary for me to have any of that napkin underneath where I'm going to glue the magazine picture down. Now, often I gesso my page before I start. That is not necessary here because I'm going to cover up the entire page with either this napkin or the magazine picture. So I don't need to gesso it because I'm not applying a whole lot of paint to it. It doesn't need to be prepped at all. So here I'm just water cutting a little bit of that napkin so I can have some over here on the top. And I'm just going to piecemeal it. So a napkin is a great way of getting a color scheme. Look to the napkin. These are artists. They know all about color theory and what works. So if you like the colors of a napkin, you can, like this one, just do some stamping on it and change it up, and it becomes almost an Insta background. So here I'm using the fluid matte medium. I'm putting a generous coat underneath the napkin and on top. And I am not worried at all about making it wrinkles. That's just added texture and value to my page. I'm using my brush that I got from Walmart to apply the fluid matte medium. And then I'm going to put a coat of fluid matte medium on top. That's just going to seal it and in effect basically do what gesso would do to prepare the page. I'm liking the yellows, the greens, and the reds of this background. And I think it's going to be a good background to show off the magazine picture. So when I get magazines from friends or different places, I go through and I rip out all those pages and just keep them in a file folder for those days that I want to look for a good focal image. So here I'm just making sure that I've got some of that background color wherever that girl is not going to cover. I've been away from art journaling for a little bit, dealing with family stuff. And sometimes when you start back, it's a little bit harder to get into it. So having some Insta backgrounds, like using this napkin, can really help you get back into the art journaling game. So once that's dry, I am just going to cut off the excess. Now, here's a little tip. You can turn it over and cut it upside down, and that makes it easier to cut it. You may have known that tip. I just thought I'd throw that in as a little extra info today. All told, without drying time, this page took under 30 minutes. So I'm quite happy with this. I like the dark hair with the dark stamping that is in the background, but I'm thinking I can make this background more of my own. But before I do it, I've got some gaps where I didn't glue it down right along the edge. So I'm just grabbing some yellow oxide, some matching the colors that were in the napkin, and just filling in the white areas that are there. I'm also going to grab some of the red there and just play with the paint and add color. This, oh, actually not red. I'm actually adding gesso in there. So remember that napkin is the base color, that it is the jump start to the background. It isn't the complete background. It's just my starting point. And I just want to fill in some of these white areas in case they will show. Do you like this color scheme? The red with the yellow and that green? Let me know in the comment section below. If there's something on there that you don't like, you can knock it back by putting a layer of paint on top. So I want to add a little more interest, so I grabbed this screen view stencil from the Crafter's Workshop. It's one of my favorites, a real workhorse. I like the small scale of it. And I'm using some white gesso. You can use white acrylic paint, and I'm just stenciling through it, adding some contrast to the background. It's knocking back some of that background and adding some visual interest. And I'm going to put this in 2 or 3 or 4 areas on my page. Now, where the girl's going, I don't have to put anything because that's the girl's going there. If I didn't know what focal point I was going to use, I would have done the entire background and then made a decision on the focal image. I'm using a makeup sponge to apply the gesso through the stencil. One of my favorite ways of applying it. So I like the red in there, but I want it's not really in the top right-hand corner. And I want to just add a little bit more red to the page. So again, I'm using what was there as a jump off, but I don't want it to look like I glued down a napkin. So here I'm just adding some red, kind of a watercolory look. And here it's not exactly the same shade of red, so I'm going over the napkin color there just to make everything work together. And adding more. Here's where you're going to make it your own. The stenciling, the stamping, the addition of color, that's where you take what was the base and change it up. Using a napkin as an Insta background or a gel print is a great way. If you don't know where to start, put that down and that will point you in the direction of where you want to go. And I just keep adding paint until I'm happy with what I see. I want to add a little more contrast to the background, especially with her dark hair. So I'm using black acrylic paint here. I'm applying it to my dot stamp, another fast favorite that I have. And I'm just going to add some of that there. It's going to add contrast, pattern, interest to my background, and it's going to tie in with the dark hair of the girl. As always, when I use acrylic paint on my stamps, I clean it with my Murphy's oil soap. You don't want to wreck your stamps. I am absolutely loving my background right now. The colors, the stamps, everything just seems to be working together. Now that I'm happy with the background and I'm done, I'm going to use my fluid matte medium and glue down the magazine picture. Now, as is often the case with magazine pictures, they have a sheen or shine to them. When you use the fluid matte medium, this mine is from Liquitex, it dulls that shine. So you get rid of that. It also seals it and turns the magazine into a non-porous surface. So should you decide to colorize it or change the color, you can do so without it wicking into the paper. So the matte medium does two jobs. Gets rid of the shine and turns it into a non-porous surface. After I've applied this, I am going to use my heat tool to dry it. I know I'm going to use my brush again, so I'm going to wrap it in saran wrap so it doesn't dry, and I'll grab it when I'm going to glue something down the road. I could use the sentiment that was there, but I wanted to put my own sentiment on here. So I'm taking some white gesso and a small brush and my finger and just knocking back the letters. Sometimes you can do this in one coat. Sometimes you're going to have to come back and put another layer on it. I'm just getting rid of what's there and I'm going to put what I want. So don't be afraid when you're choosing magazine pictures. If there's text on it, there's a way of getting rid of that text to make it more usable on your page. So now I'm using unbleached titanium. It's that color, it's a very close color match to the straw hat color. So I'm just putting that on top of the white. And between the two, I've gotten rid of the text that was there and made it look like just a plain, ordinary hat. And you can see off to the left the sentiment that I have, take flight, that I am going to put on there. Now, that sentiment, again, it's something that has been floating around on my desk for the last several weeks. And so today, with the challenge of use everything within arm's reach, don't dig for anything. So I just, from stencils to stamps to sentiment to focal image to background starter. These were all things that were just hanging out in my studio because, well, for the most part, I hadn't put them away. So her dress is the wrong shade of yellow. So I decided I'm just going to take that yellow oxide and make her dress color match more closely what I have going on in the background. Basically, I just want the girl in the hat, and this I'm going to I'm going to add red to in a minute, and just so it looks like it's background. Nothing special, nothing, no dress at all. It's unimportant. So here I start adding a little bit of red, and then I end up making it all kind of a reddish orange color. You got to take chances. If it works out, great. If it doesn't, then you learn something. But it's fun. And I really needed to do some art journaling today, art therapy. So here I'm turning her dress into red. Now I'm ready to start the finishing process for the page. And one of the finishing things that I always do, I shade or edge the page with black acrylic paint. I'm using my angle brush and I'm using the floating acrylic or shading technique. There is a video that teaches specifically how to do shading or highlighting using this technique. If I remember, I'll link it below. Where do you start your pages? Do you start with the focal image or do you start with the background? So once I've edged this page, I'm also going to shade around the focal image. That's going to make the focal image stand out from the background. Just work my way around the magazine picture, just adding a little bit of shading to make everything work together. I'm also going to do, in a minute, some shading on the hat and on the magazine picture, just like you see me doing here. And a little more shading. I didn't like that. I was using the yellow oxide, so I grabbed a baby wipe and got rid of it. And I was able to do that because there was a coat of the fluid matte medium on top. So it gives you a little bit of playtime in case you do something that you don't like. You can always erase it. I'm just adding a little more of the unbleached titanium. Some of those letters are still showing through. Just going to deepen the color of her lipstick more to match the background color that I have. And then I'm going to add a dragonfly to the hat. I love the saying, dragonflies appear when a loved one is near. And I'm going to use the sentiment from Take Flight. And I'm just going to cut it apart so it kind of fits better on the hat. Now that dragonfly, because I love dragonflies so much, and that saying, when I stamp them out on paper, I stamp out extra to have in my stash. I like adding it to magazine pictures or focal images from a napkin. Remember, you can always combine your focal images from different sources, like I did here. Gluing it all down with my fluid matte medium. And as I said, that's the Liquitex brand. I'm just going to position this. And putting a coat on top just to seal it and turn it into that non-porous surface again. Because I'm going to want to come back and do some shading on that dragonfly. I thought about painting it, adding some color, but I wasn't sure what I wanted, so I just decided to do some shading with the black acrylic paint just to make it stand out a little bit more. If you want it, you could have added some iridescent medium to that just to make it shimmer and shine. Because dragonflies always have that iridescent quality to them, I find. Now, the sentiment was a bit faded from the printer, so I'm grabbing my black Posca pen and just darkening it up. I could have used a liner brush and a little bit of thinned black paint as well to fill it in, but I just wanted it a little bit bolder than what it was. And little by little, step by step, we're at the end of the page. So look around your art space. Grab some things that are lying around. See how you can combine them to make a page. Just going to add some line work around the edge of the page. And that's going to bring us to the end. Close-ups of the finished page are to follow. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you learned one or two things. Look at that background. And to think it started with a leftover napkin. Oh, here's the tool that I used. This comes from the deodorant, the cap off the deodorant. Great mark making tool. Check out your recycle bin for other great mark making tools. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, go get creative.